Good afternoon and welcome to the Randwick Local Planning Panel. I'm the chair of the panel. My name is Annalise Tour. With me are Oliver Klein and Sandra Robinson as expert members and Michelle Finnegan as the community representative on the panel. Before prior to the commencement of this meeting, all panel members will be required to sign a declaration of interest in relation to each matter on the agenda. I can confirm that all declarations have been received and that there is one conflict of interest that has been declared by Ms Finnegan, and I'll just ask her to explain what that conflict is.
I have a reasonably perceived conflict of interest with 14 Ocean Street, Clovelly. The applicant, Mr Stevens, is an acquaintance of mine and I've been entertained in the property in the previous 12 months.
And also Ms Robinson doesn't have a conflict of interest, but for the record she wants to declare a matter.
I just wanted to put on public record that I'm acquainted with the architect for 18 Marine Parade. I don't have a conflict of interest, but we have worked together in the past.
Thank you. The signed declarations of interest will be available to view through Council's website by tomorrow afternoon. Today we have a number of speakers, a number of people registered to address the panel, including a councillor. The registered speakers for each item will be heard in the following order: councillors, objector and applicant. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes to address the panel. However, in relation to item 1, Mr Moody is speaking on behalf of a number of adjoining properties, so he has requested that he be allowed to speak for 5 minutes, and I've agreed to that request. If the chair considers it appropriate, an extension of 1 minute may be granted upon request for other matters. The panel has been provided with copies of all the submissions received in response to the public exhibition of the application, and therefore there's no need for speakers to repeat all the points made in their submissions. Speakers should focus on the key matters that they wish us to understand and consider, including any suggestions about how their concerns may be resolved. The applicant may wish to comment on issues raised in the Council's report, provide a response to proposed conditions and or address any issues raised by an objector or councillor. After the speaker has addressed the panel members may ask the speaker questions to clarify any matters. Only registered speakers will be allowed to speak and respond to questions. Any person using defamatory, discriminatory or offensive language may be asked to leave the meeting, or the meeting may be adjourned. An audio recording is being made of this meeting, and we ask that speakers use the microphone on the stand when they're addressing the panel to ensure that their comments are recorded. The audio recording will be available through Council's website by tomorrow afternoon. After all registered speakers have been heard, the panel will move to another room to deliberate and vote on each matter. The first application with registered speakers is item 1, 190 to 192 Oberon Street, Coogee, and we have, as I said, Mr Tony Meady speaking on behalf of a number of objectors. So if you can come forward.
Chair, panel members, my name is Tony Moody. I'm a consultant planner. I'm speaking in support of objections from adjoining properties to the south, southeast and west of the subject site. I should firstly say that we requested the applicant to erect height poles for the benefit of the planning panel as they did previously, and I understand that council requested that, but the applicant did not erect the height poles. I trust, however, the photo montages prepared by the applicant and the drone assist. I should also say that I fully support flat development on this land. It's clearly designed for such, and as consistent with former Chief Judge McClellan, it's now subject to the design. I raise strong objections to I don't raise objections to the proposed front building. I raise strong objections in terms of the location of the proposed rear building. The Council's own Design Excellence Panel and the Design Review Panel, the same panel but under different names and somewhat slightly different constituent members, spoke of this development being a departure from the character of the area. The panel said there was a landscape setting at the rear. and the Design Review Panel and the Design Excellence Panel both said, bring the rear building back in line with the adjoining buildings. That is a fundamental concern of my clients and professionally myself. Council made the same request to the applicant, and the applicant said no. There was no change because they considered it consistent. We're asking you to rely upon the comments of the Design Review Panel and Design Excellence Panel, and your own, obviously, more importantly, your own observations about what you saw today. I consider that the building bulk at the rear is excessive. The photo montages, in my view, demonstrate that, and your own observations of the drone. I think the vegetated character in the rear is a wonderful character, and it should be achieved. The applicant seeks a complying development criteria. They're comparing it as per the photographs, photo montages. We say that's inappropriate. Firstly, the DCP actually specifically says that these planning controls are not as of right. You don't get a Guernsey just because you comply. But even then, this proposed development does not fully comply. There's also the recent Land Environment Court case of Rebel before His Honour Justice Moore, who said there's no entitlement to applicants to even achieve compliance because there are nuances relating to the planning controls. Court planning principle, tension between height and FSR is also relevant. We're asking that it be pushed closer to the street. We are asking that the rear building be pushed closer to the street. The other significant concerns are over lack of deep soil landscaping. The western basement car park is on the boundary for a significant portion of the western boundary. You're in the property of Greg, I think it's at number 188. He faces a visually imposing building with no deep soil landscaping for a significant portion. I find that unacceptable. There's also an issue of overshadowing. The shadow plans were clearly inaccurate. There's an argument that, it's in an area of transition. But the planning controls relating to solar access were formulated based on this criteria. In other words, the zoning. Can I just raise one further issue of flooding? And if I could just refer you to page 30 of the, if I could just ask a slight extension in time, please. All right, thank you very much. I have a law degree and practice as a solicitor, but I'm not here to give you, obviously, legal advice. But if I could ask you to refer you to the development memorandum where it says, quote, the planning officer is advised that the submitted drainage plan should not be approved in conjunction with the DA. Rather, that the development engineer has included a number of conditions in the memo that relates to drainage. The applicant is required to submit detailed drainage plans. And if you go down to the second last paragraph, the development must not raise flood levels to the site. The proposed development must not block or divert existing flow paths. In satisfying the flood-related conditions, the applicant will need to examine the pre-development conditions and ensure that the post-development conditions satisfy the above requirements. With the greatest respect, that's deferring an essential matter. This area has been highlighted by council as an area of significant and severe impact. Council thought so highly or so concerned about flooding, they formulated their own planning study appointing a consultant. This document is essentially saying we haven't fully assessed this and the applicant will have to go back to prepare pre-development status assessment and post-development status. You do not know whether in fact this development will exacerbate what is already a severe flooding scenario. And from my legal qualifications, I consider that's a deferring of an essential matter which cannot be remedied. Chair and panel members, when I first came onto that property and the locality, I thought the landscape setting was a wonderful landscape setting. This development can be approved in a modified form. The architects for the applicant, I think, are wonderful architects. They've got a brief. All we're asking for is a deferral or rejection, but if a deferral, moving that rear building closer to the street, consistent with the rear setback as identified by the DEP and DRP. Thank you.
Mr. Moody, you didn't comment on the clause 4.6 in terms of the non-compliance with the floor space ratio. Do you have any comments on that?
They're relying principally in part on a compliant building envelope. That of itself is a seriously flawed basis for the clause 4.6. I also consider that they haven't demonstrated positive environmental grounds. One, they're reducing the landscape setting. Two, it's acknowledged in the report that there's a breach of overshadowing control. And three, I consider that there's an imposing visual impact, particularly, for example, on the property to the west. Lesser so at other properties, but still, in my view, unsatisfactory. You have a visually imposing building in an area in which normally you'd have a landscape setting. There is an opportunity for a redesign here. My clients and myself are not saying no to a flat development. I wouldn't be standing here if they held that opinion. So I think the clause 4.6 is flawed.
And you're concerned principally about the proximity of the building to the rear in terms of the whole building's location to the rear or the height of that building to the rear, like the upper story?
I think it's the wall plus the upper story. The photomontage is evidence. For example, the photomontages before you actually don't even show the impact of the top floor as well from the western property. That's what he will see, the owner. And so I think it's the wall height, and then the properties to the south will see the whole structure. And I consider that if this was moved closer to the street, consistent with the character of consistent street setbacks, I think, and it has to be modelled, obviously. There might even be extensions to the northeastern building, proposed building. But the rear building line is anathema to this character, which I think is a very commendable character.
So removing part of the upper story would not address
No.
your concerns. It would be actually, as you say, moving it or
Correct.
increasing the setback.
And I think there's opportunity to retain the same floor space, but in a different design, and that's what we're seeking from the panel.
All right, any other questions? No, thank you.
Thank you very much.
On behalf of the applicant, we have Mr. Anthony Betros, planner. He's accompanied by the architect, Brian Myerson, and Amanda Stoley as well, I think. But they're just to, if there's any questions, they're here to answer questions. So if you want to come forward, Mr. Betros.
Sure. You're good.
Thank you, panel, for the opportunity to speak before you this afternoon. Obviously speak in support of the recommendation for conditional approval. I'd just like to address the conditions that we are concerned with at the moment first, and then I'll address some matters that were raised by Mr. Moody, and then if you want me to answer any questions, happy to do so. Firstly, if I could take you to condition 2B, there's a condition to increase the deep soil at the rear through reduction of the basement storage area. The extent to that condition is sought to be increased is 1.8 metres. That is excessive and unnecessary. It would actually also result in car spaces that are 4.7 metres in length, which is obviously below the 5.4 metres required. 1.1 metres is sufficient to achieve council's intent of achieving deep soil compliance and still maintaining those 6 car spaces. So we would seek that condition 2B be amended from 1.8 to 1.1. Secondly, condition 2E. This relates to the projecting windows in the side setbacks of the eastern and western elevations. Those items contribute to not only articulation, but also getting north-facing sunlight into the rearmost building. That's a positive aspect of the proposal, as it provides articulation as well as providing for better internal amenity. Our architect has also provided some examples which I'll take you to at 5-7 Stark Street of a very similar design rationale by the same architect, and we're also involved with another one at 252 Maruba Road, which this panel also approved, which had the same ear windows, if I can describe them in that manner. So in my opinion, they actually provide for visual relief whilst also improving amenity, and are a far better solution than the condition that is imposed by 2E. So would we seek that to be deleted? 2F. This is an extremely onerous and unnecessary and unreasonable condition. Seeks the south-facing balconies of bedrooms G04, that's ground level, 104 and 2L3 shall be deleted, with the remaining area to be landscaped and non-trafficable, accessed for maintenance purposes only. Now, as I'll show you on the aerial photograph, the southern neighbours are 32 to 37 metres to their primary private open space areas and greater that distance to their actual living areas. There's also established screening on those sites, and you'll see from the landscape plan there is substantial screening proposed as well within the rear setback. The rear setback is also compliant. Now, I know Mr Moody mentioned something about, oh, just because you comply, it doesn't mean you can have it. Section 79C, now 4.15 of the Act, has been amended to say if you comply with the standard, council or this consent authority can't impose a more onerous requirement. So compliance with the rear setback, as well as compliance with landscaping, lack of shadowing and lack of visual bulk and privacy issues, are all factors which would demonstrate such rear setback, and that condition is totally unreasonable. Can I have an extension similar to Mr Moody? Thank you. So in that instance, those non-trafficable areas for landscaping seem to be totally unnecessary and unreasonable, and that also affects the amenity of those units without any due cause. Related to that, those windows have a minimum sill height of 1.6 metres. That is a significant impact to the amenity of those units, which would currently enjoy a landscape setting outlook to the south, and as I've just said, the neighbours are so far away, and the amount of landscaping between both properties does not warrant that condition. There's also a condition 2.0, which is also considered to be detrimental to the amenity of the building, which requires the west-facing windows that face the common courtyard to be 1.6 metres or other design treatments to address privacy. Those windows have been designed to take advantage of the large communal open space area, and with this L-shaped design, normally you would have a building where that communal open space is. So the western neighbour is far better off with this option, and the condition is therefore unreasonable and unnecessary again.
That's just the first dot point?
Yeah, all west-facing windows to the northern portion of the building, and same with the all east, west and south on the next dot point as well. Again, all the setbacks are actually complied with or exceeded. So on that basis, we would say they be deleted. I'll just take you through quickly, if I may, or if I'll just answer any questions. Yeah, I haven't actually. If you want me to show you, I can show you the presentation quickly, or I can address it by questions from yourself, if there are any. Thank you. It's only a couple of pages. This is just the rationale for the site development. A H form could have been considered, but you can see the effect that would have had on the western neighbour, where the design approach has a far better communal outcome, as well as providing for a reduced bulk as viewed from the western neighbour. So the street is on the right in those two pictures. That shows you in more a 3D form the proposed building and how the communal open space is oriented to the north, and the design has actually been centred on communal open space rather than being an afterthought where you just put it in a redundant setback. This shows you the aerial with the setbacks of those properties, and I can point you to the exact figures if so desired. The ones to the south are the 32 to 37, and the ones to the southeast to 174 Brook Street are 11 to 12 metres. And then on the western side, they're all compliant with the protrusions only, providing articulation and internal amenity. These shots, I think, are significant in that they show the outlook to the south from the levels 1 and then levels 2. Now, any vegetation in the foreground is actually going to be replaced by new vegetation, but the vegetation in the distance will all be retained, obviously that being partially on site but mainly on the neighbours' sites to the rear. This is the just the layout of the site, so if you want me to take you to any of the aspects of design, I can. But I do think that also displays the benefit of those ear windows on both side elevations, and that they provide for visual relief whilst also providing for northern solar access. And that's also demonstrated in these solar analysis that those ear windows do assist in picking up solar access to the southern building. Thank you.
All right, questions? Yes, do you want to go first?
I may have misunderstood. In going through the conditions at 2, was 2K one of those that you were seeking to delete or amend?
I'll just check the actual conditions. The form I've got here doesn't, but I'll just check that. Sorry. Thank you, sorry for that. Yeah, that's the 1.6 metre screen as well, yes.
Yep.
Associated with the planter boxes. That would just wall you in more or less from those bedrooms, but it's totally unnecessary. Thank you for picking that up.
And my other question relates to the massing graphic that you showed. Were other massing options explored that were more in keeping with the design excellence panel? And with particular attention then to the floor space ratio objectives?
Sure.
And then essentially also the one about visual amenity?
Yes. So before lodging the DA, as you would have seen from the council report, we had a pre-DA, and the pre-DA mentioned a series of recommendations and comments. Most of those were taken on board. Some have been slightly adjusted, but I believe we have addressed each of those aspects in terms of including access ways, in terms of FSR, providing a slightly greater rear setback, increasing the side setbacks from 3 to 4 metres, and also improving the quality of landscaping within the front setback. The relationship of the existing building being retained was seen as a positive, regardless of it not being in a conservation area, not being heritage listed, but the panel saw that as an admirable feature of the development. This development, just from first principles, if you just applied a front setback, 2 side setbacks of 4 metres and the rear setback as proposed, you would have a large rectangle on the site. Now, I'm not saying you would approach the site like that, but that would be the building envelope. From what you can see, this building is well within any potential building envelope of that. It would be approximately, I think, 2/3 of that envelope. So I think just approaching it from that aspect first, it shows how sensitive this development is. As I said, the design hasn't changed too much because I think the panel did like this rationale. The 2-block model would probably have resulted in the southern block being more overshadowed than this model, and also less favourable communal open space. But I think the major benefit of this development is the effect for the western neighbour, that they have a landscape setting to their east, not a built form within 4 metres. It's also a lot more subtle streetscape impact, as you can see from the photo montage that's within the report. Yeah, and if you want Brian to answer those ones.
My name's Brian Myers and I'm the architect. Just to answer your question about other forms being explored, there were, but they were more sort of solid massings. But the ADG and SIP 65 requirements dictate better solar access and better cross ventilation. That's why that the H form is actually what you'd end up doing on the site if you didn't do this. We thought this, and the panel, I understand both the panel and the council planners supported the concept of respecting the Art Deco building, preserving it, and the advantages that this design provides in northerly aspect. It also gives better solar access to the east-facing windows of the house next door.
Sorry, did you want
No.
So just on the retention of the existing building, if you go to, I think it's section A, DA 3100, presumably the orange is indicative of what will be retained in the existing building. Do you need a set of plans or?
We have one here, 3100.
What's been retained at the facade and the side. Here's yours, Brian.
Here we go. Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, so DA 3100.
Yes, I have that.
The orange is indicative of what's being retained, is that correct or not?
Yeah.
Yes, correct.
So how can you retain those to the level 1 slab and the level 2 roof when you're doing the excavation underneath it and removing all the internal walls?
There was a detailed structural report prepared for that, and it is done by means of propping and supporting those floors while the excavation takes place underneath. So that's been supported by a structural engineer's report.
So where it says plant, you're removing the floor there and you'd be excavating there. Presumably where it says the basement that goes towards Oberon Street, you're going to presumably excavate above it. So the whole of the underneath that building presumably is going to be excavated.
No, the part above that where it says basement will be retained.
And you'll go
So
in
it will
underneath.
tunnel under, yes.
And so but why are you actually, it just seems like the amount of effort you're going to retain 2 internal slabs when you're only keeping 2 of the external walls, I can't understand it, that's all.
Yeah, so I mean that's the montage of the design.
Well, even when
So
you look
it's-
at, say if you look at the elevation, which I think is DA 303, the extent of the external wall that you're keeping is the front part with the new building. It's not underneath the new part of the western elevation.
Yes.
It's only the front bit.
Yes, correct.
So there should be an actual line that shows a joint between the new bit and the old bit. Anyway, it's
Yes,
just
yes.
that
It seems like a lot of effort, but it's been identified as a pair of buildings on Oberon Street, and we thought it would be worth the effort to do that.
yes, although in terms of the desired future character, the actual likelihood of the adjoining pair in the long term being retained is probably fairly minimal. It's just a lot of dispensation is potentially being given on the basis of the retention of that building, and I think we've got some concerns just about being sure that that retention would be something that would be able to be achieved, realistically being able to be achieved.
Well, it's mainly the facade that
Yeah.
needs to be retained. Okay.
All right, and then just following on from that, in relation to the sort of design philosophy, so whether you're the best person or whether Mr. Petros is the best person to answer this, but floor space ratio, you've got a certain allocation under the planning controls for floor space ratio on the site, and then it becomes a question of how you actually distribute that floor space ratio on the site, and there's obviously considerations in doing that in such as the amenity of the units that they will achieve and what's the best way of distributing it for the amenity of the units, and then there's also considerations about the amenity in terms of the streetscape
Yes.
and adjoining properties. So at the moment, I think some of the concerns that have been expressed by the objectors are that the amenity for the units is perhaps something that's being achieved, but in relation to the street, you're not putting building where, in the building zone of the street, you're sort of putting building in the green zone of the area, which then has potentially resultant impacts on adjoining properties. And even though you're complying with the minimum setbacks, and we can't impose more onerous things, potentially your floor space could be changed in its location. So things like if you look at just DA 2001, you've got a large gap between, or actually probably that's not the best one, it would be DA 2002. You've got a large gap between the retained building and the new building, which gives a whole lot of light to the entry lobby. But if you shifted the whole building to get rid of that gap, there's only one bedroom on each floor that would potentially be affected by that, as well as the lobby. So, and that would then shift the whole building quite considerably from the rear. So I suppose it's just getting some comments on.
Yeah, we
that
thought
very long statement.
that was reasonable in terms of the amenity and the sort of the distribution on the site, but also because we're still retaining the vegetative zone between the rear setback, which is that 9 metres approximately, and so that vegetative zone is in fact being retained. That's been spoken about, and that was supported by the panel and the council officers. So we think that's actually a reasonable balance.
Mm-hmm. Right. Any other questions?
Mr Myerson, if the panel had concerns, we did see we've listened to Mr Moody, we had a very good productive site visit, and we're mindful of the fact that there's a zone boundary change to the south. Is your client of a mind to request a deferral because we can't defer it, and the concerns we have are not conditionable. But if you were to ask us to defer it, if you had some ideas on what might address some of the concerns we've heard today?
Well, I'd have to confer with the clients on that. Could I have some time to do that?
I mean, particularly if we were to find that the clause 4.6 isn't, we're not satisfied with it, then we would potentially be looking at reducing, I think it's about 100 square metres, and how would you do that? Or is there a way of, looking at options to move the building forward further or whatever, that perhaps you could still then do your clause 4.6 for FSR, but there'd be more rationale. I think it's just we've got concerns about the distribution of the floor space on the site and the results in terms of.
So,
but you can have an adjournment if you
Yeah.
want, just to go and discuss it.
Can I address the point you're concerned about, if that's all right? So as you know, if you've got a design interface, you have 6 metres plus you add another 3, which is 9. We're 8.6 metres, but I think given the amount of landscaping proposed on the site that's been retained and that abundant separation to the neighbours being 32 to 37 metres, there'd be no, in my opinion, justification to increase it further. Obviously we can look at it and we'll discuss that now, but in terms of the lack of shadow impact associated with that separation distance, and those separation distances have been far beyond any interface that would be contemplated by the ADG. I just don't, and in terms of visual bulk as well, we're a 3 to 4 storey building, and that's consistent with what's the desired future character. So for all those reasons, I wouldn't think it warranted, but obviously, no. So for those reasons, I think we think the application is fine as supported by the staff, without some of those conditions, which actually don't change FSR, but in our opinion, really just reduce the amenity of the apartments with no particular benefit to the neighbours, and I think it'd be a more perceived improvement of privacy without actually achieving anything by providing a 1.6 metre screen when the neighbours are 37 metres away.
Yes. So you said that the neighbours are 37 metres away. That's the built form on the neighbour's property.
That's the principal private open space. They do have yards closer,
Yeah.
but then you've got very dense vegetation in between existing and proposed. I don't think you would take the principal private open space to be the last 20 metres even. I mean, if you took that, we'd still be well beyond any typical. I mean, I think the aerial is quite telling in that regard. And those images as well, which more or less confirm what the real aspect will be. I mean, that's an incredible interface from an R3 to an R2 zone, in my opinion.
But that's looking from your property to the R2 zone.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
And the difficulty with those images, for example, the one on the left, all of that oleander on the site will be removed. Obviously, there's some replacement
Correct,
planting.
yeah.
But it's sort of a mixed match of planting on the adjoining properties, planting on the site that's going to actually be removed.
Yeah, I mean, the architect has prepared some diagrams, and I'm not sure if I can hand these to you, but I think it would assist in terms of understanding what's been retained and what's been removed, and the significant trees are all being retained. They're marked in green and red to show green retained and red removed. So if that would assist you, I'd be happy to pass those up. But again, I think in a dense urban environment such as Coogee, to have this sort of relationship and that distance, I don't think warrants any further reduction in the or pushing the building closer to the north. That central lobby area has been looked at quite carefully, and compressing it does affect the amenity of the units as well. So it's not that straightforward a design amendment.
Just changing the topic, do you have any comments to make in relation to Mr Moody's discussion on drainage as to it being potentially deferring an essential matter to a later stage, and that matter should be considered as part of the application?
Yeah, I'd have to disagree with Mr Moody's comments about it being that they can't be dealt with by conditions of consent. Our engineer has checked those conditions, and he has actually provided a response as well to each of those issues raised, and finds that the application can be achieved with those conditions without any uncertainty.
Although, as I understand it, even with the additional information, the proposed condition, I think it's condition 17,
Yes.
Still requires that there be the clarification of the pre-development flows and the pre-development condition, the existing flow path regime and flood levels through surrounding and downstream of the development site, and compare that with the proposed flow paths and flood levels of post-development. So I think the point that Mr Moody's making is that that's deferring an essential, consideration to a later stage.
Yeah, so the drainage engineer has looked at the amount of the effect of the stormwater runoff reduction, and also the collection of stormwater on the site. And the proposal says actually will have a beneficial impact. So I'm not sure if that has been provided to you as well, whether that assists in informing your opinion on whether the conditions are satisfactory.
So you're saying that the information is before council about the pre-development flows and the post-development flows. So that information is before council at the moment.
I'll just check with, sorry, I've just been provided this by the client in response to concerns, and I'm not sure if that has already formed part of the documentation of council.
Okay. Well, actually, I can ask perhaps the council officers. Does anyone wish to comment on that?
So council received yesterday from the applicant's hydraulic engineer confirmation that they believe that condition can be complied with. In conjunction with council's got flood models for the area as well that show the amount of flooding in the area, which is council's own documentation. So based on what they've provided, there's nothing to suggest that the conditions couldn't be complied with, but we wouldn't be looking at deleting them because we wouldn't get the full documentation. But
Do we have the information on the pre-development flows, and do we have the information on the post-development flows? Because at the moment the wording of the condition is essentially do your assessment later. But
so the coordinator of development engineering has got, in relation to the pre-development flows, council has got a flood study for that area. That is council's flood study, for which the applicant's hydraulic engineer submitted as part of the DA the flows in that area. That identifies the development site is actually not in the bulk of the 1 in 100 year flood area, which reduces the concerns in relation to flooding quite substantially. So council has got that data fully. What the development engineering coordinator has advised us is that he would still like to see the absolute details of the modelling as well, but there's nothing that he has got concern with in relation to the impact, given that this site, the documentation that council has shows that it's not within the core flood area for the 1 in 100 year on council's modelling data.
Any further questions? No. All right, thank you very much. So we'll defer our consideration on this matter. The next item is 417A Maroubra Road, Maroubra. And we have two objectors. The first, Mr. Alan I don't know how to say your name. Smuskowitz. Thank you. Do you want to come forward? He said no.
Thank you.
Is it on? Thank you. My name's Alan Smuskowitz. I'm an architect. I run a practice mask architecture, and I'm also a resident across the road from this proposed development. I thank you for the opportunity to address the panel. I would like to make an argument that this is an overdevelopment of a small site. While it has R3 zoning, I would think that that the intent was for a consolidation of sites in order for it to achieve the maximum height and bulk of the site. As an architect that operates in the locality, I understand and support good development, of which I think this is really not one. This is a badly designed building that only seeks to address the needs of the developer. The length and amount of recommendations made by the DEP report would concur with that assessment in my view. I think that the development proposal is an overreach and has negative impacts for all its neighbours. The impacts of view loss for myself, for everyone in my building, for people in the next door building that I've been asked to represent. This has financial impacts on everyone and lifestyle impacts. I'm not sure that the documentation is accurate, and in addition, I don't understand who the nominated architect is for this particular development. As an RFP, I think it is required to have a nominated architect, a registered architect. I'd like to understand that. There's overshadowing, which will be addressed by one of my other neighbours. But my main argument rests around the design of the building. So in order to achieve the parking requirement of a minimum of 7 bays, the proposed design relies on the use of car stackers. Without the use of these stackers, the development would be required to lose an apartment. To accommodate the stackers, the floor-to-floor level between the basement and the first floor is 3.7 metres and a metre out of the ground. So the requirement for in Australian standards is 2.2 metres for a basement. 2.4 you can do, but at the moment it's 3.7 metres floor to floor. This means that the building should and could be lowered by a metre. With the reduced reduction, it would mean that they would lose an apartment, which would bring this building down to the correct scale, which would allow for the setbacks, would allow for the view sharing. It would allow for my neighbours to get sun access to their properties. So also specifically at the front of the building, I don't think that the building has been aligned to the street setback of all the other buildings in the street. So if you just get So whilst I have the utmost respect for the council planners, I think that the recommendations of this approval is wrong, and that the proposal should be refused or amended in order to reassess that design. And I was here recently to the panel, and one of the questions that was placed on us, because we do a building around the corner, was for the drying yard. The drying yard, just as an example of bad design, the drying yard in this project has been put into the front setback along Maroubra Road. Now, it's just an inappropriate place for the drying yard to be. Does everyone need to come to Maroubra Beach needs to see this the clothes hanging on in the front setback. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for your consideration. Any questions?
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Paul O'Donoghue.
Thank you. So my name's Paul O'Donoghue. I'm a resident and owner at 3 Heraldwood Street, adjacent to 417A Maroubra Road on the south side. I've lived there for 26 years with my family, my wife Deborah and daughter Kai. Today I want to speak specifically about some reasonably personal issues in a public place. I'm going to proceed because I think that the planning process needs to consider people's needs, and if it can't do that, then it's seriously flawed. In the past, we've provided detailed submissions to Council regarding objections to the development, specific to scale of build, privacy, overshadowing, light, noise, risk of damage to property and stormwater issues. These concerns remain, but I don't intend to talk to them today because you already have those submissions. I want to talk about our needs and our neighbours' needs and hopefully link these to some of the objections we still hold and the specific ones I want to address today. Firstly, I want to talk about my daughter Kai. Kai suffers from a serious intellectual disability. She has Kask syndrome. There's only one other diagnosed sufferer in Australia. It's a genetic disease requiring lifelong therapy and support. It affects gross motor, speech, vision, hearing, mood, digestion and behaviour. But specifically in relation to the development application, Kai experiences heightened anxiety and she has photoepilepsy and reacts significantly to sudden and loud noises. Now, there's no words I can give you for you to be able to understand what goes on for Kai, okay? It's a lived experience. But in order to give Kai her best environment and to be supported and managed, we've made several modifications to our home, including builds for accessible bathrooms, ramping for mobility access. Kai will be severely affected by this build, and I'm not saying don't go ahead with the build or a development, but in the short term, it'll be a result of the noise from the build, and in the long term, as a result of noise, overshadowing, and loss of natural light and privacy. Kai spends a great deal of time in what she refers to as her comfy room. She sits in her comfortable chair next to a window that fills her room with natural light. All her therapists spend time in her room providing her with therapeutic intervention there because they want to train her to manage her own environment. Okay? As a result of the proposed build, she will lose light, and this will impact on her enjoyment and her health, which I believe she has a right to. We do not have a move-away option, and Kai does not have another accommodation option. I'd like to point out here that our house is a semi-detached house with a northern aspect. We don't have light from the south side, so we can't go somewhere else and get light. Okay? While we object to the design and lack of fit into the neighbourhood, stormwater issues concern us, and lack of effort to reduce energy footprint, our main objections to this development, and we do not oppose a development, they have not changed since our first discussions and considerations. We object to overshadowing of our bedrooms, living areas and bathrooms. We object to the loss of privacy in these areas and significantly to bathroom on the top level where we have skylights. The overshadowing will make our solar panels redundant during winter and impacted on during other parts of the year. We object to the noise that will follow with the increased tenancies and the use of car stackers and roller doors right next to our 2 front bedrooms. If you bear with me, I won't be much longer. Okay? Our neighbours in 419 Maroubra Road, and I've been asked to make this objection clear today too, have similar objections. These people have made their home here and they want their natural light and privacy to remain. They are very concerned, as we are, about the risk of damage to their properties during the build, despite the development the development conditions setting that out. The neighbours across the road at Herwood Street that Alan's already referred to have made decisions. I know people talk about people don't own views. They've made very serious lifetime financial decisions about buying properties that have views. So the loss of view is going to impact significantly on their life planning, finances and health. Now, all these objections that I've mentioned today are mitigated if the build is scaled down. The problem is the size of the build on the land parcel, the depth of the car park and the height of the build. The car stackers should go. The building should be 2 and not 3 stories so that the height complies with the code. It should have a hip roof and the build should be set back further from the boundary so there is more deep soil and garden areas. Privacy needs more consideration with privacy screens on the balcony. That's my position or our position. So thanks for the time.
Thank you. Can you just, I don't know if you've got plans in front of you, but if you come over, can you show me the windows that you're concerned? So that's the subject site, that's Maruba Road. Mm-hmm. So that's your property there, is it?
Oh, yep. No, is that Maruba Road?
No, that's
Herwood Street.
yes.
No, this is it here.
Yep. And these, that indicates window.
Right.
So can you...
There's a window on the top. There's a Cape Cod addition. There's 2, what do I just call them? Windows that go into the roof.
Yeah.
Rooftop windows. And then below that there's another level. And on the next level, which is the original semi, there's a bedroom window at the front where the driveway will be. Yep.
So that would be that there, or
Yep.
That's quite a small window.
And then there's another window in Kai's room.
And which is that one?
That would be... This doesn't represent the build at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's those windows. That's Kai's window there. Okay, they're the roof windows. There's 2 there, 1 there and 1 over the bathroom. There's that window for the first bedroom, that one there. Then there's Kai's window, and then there's the lounge room window.
So the ones that you're most concerned about would be Kai's and the
Yes,
room.
yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, on behalf of the applicant, we have Ms. Emma Rogerson.
Good afternoon, panel members. The development at 417A Maruba Road proposes to demolish the existing single dwelling on site and construct a 3-storey residential flat building comprising of 5 units. The development includes a basement car park with storage, waste room, 7 car parking spaces, 1 motorbike spot and bicycle parking too. The proposal is an articulated contemporary design of high quality construction that will provide a variety of housing for the surrounding locality, comprising of 2 studio apartments, 2 2-bedroom units, 1 3-bedroom unit, and one of these being an adaptable unit. As revealed above in this image, with the site on the right, the locality is dominated by residential flat buildings of 3 and 4 stories high. This locality map further highlights the commonality of residential flat buildings of similar scale, character and building envelope as our proposed development. Almost every single property contains one. Whilst the southwestern neighbours are an attached single-storey dwelling house, this housing style is uncommon, not identified to be preserved, and it's only a matter of time before these are redeveloped too. The proposal generally complies with and exceeds the local council legislation, including the Randwick LEP and DCP, SEP 65, and the Apartment Design Guide. Of most importance, the stipulated floor space ratio, setbacks, maximum height, parking, and the building envelope are completely satisfied and exceeded by the skillful design. The only minor non-compliance regarding a 400mm wall height control variation is acceptable, as it's not going to result in an impact for the locality. The concerns raised within submissions during notification by the Design Excellence Panel and by local council have been addressed to mitigate any impact on the amenity of the neighbours and the wider community. These changes include the increase of rear and side setbacks. As you can see in these images, the red outline shows the initial design. A reduction in balcony size, reduction of building height of 450mm, and a reduction of car parking space too. A primary concern raised relates to the overshadowing of solar panels. The adjoining neighbours at 3 to 5 Hereward Street have solar panels on a portion of their roof. As proven by these shadow diagrams above, these solar collectors will receive a minimum of 3 hours of sunlight during the winter solstice between 9 AM and 3 PM as required. And it's noted that this is actually the worst condition that will occur on site. Every other day of the year will experience more than this. Another concern raised relates to the obstruction of view loss. The view analysis as shown above depicts the minor extent of view loss produced on an already compromised ocean view. The existing view contains no iconic items and is therefore of minimal value as established by the tenacity principles. May I request an extension?
Yes,
Thank you.
allow 1 minute.
The proposed design has been altered to reduce this obstruction as far as possible by reducing the building height by 450mm and by chamfering the front balconies, increasing the front setback. The building envelope controls are complied with, and the impact for surrounding properties is marginal. It has therefore been demonstrated that the proposal is suitable for the site and the desired future character of the area. It will benefit the community as a variety of housing, including adaptable units, will be offered and is therefore in the public interest. The design is compliant with planning legislation and supported by council, planners, as well as the engineers, and will most importantly not interfere with the amenity of the neighbours or the wider community. Our concerns regarding the structural stability of the site and lowering it down, during construction, will be addressed within the conditions of the consent, and we therefore request that the panel approves the application in accordance with the council recommendation. Thank you.
I'm sorry, it was brought up that about the application in accordance with SEP 65 being certified by an architect.
Oh yeah, the architect is 8912. That's the Martin Bednarczyk.
Registration.
Yeah, its registration number is 8912.
So they're not the ones that have done the plans that are before us?
He is. He's the principal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Did the architect prepare a design verification for the DA, confirming that they're a registered architect? Was
Yes.
it part of the application?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll defer our consideration on this item. The next matter is 18 Marine Parade, Maroubra, and we have one. Okay. Well, good timing. Anyway, we have the architect, Madeline Blanchfield, I think, is speaking, and then presumably Mr. Kerry Nash is here to answer any questions, or is it the other way around? Okay. go to the next one. Okay, look what, just go to the next one, which is 14 Ocean Street, Clovelly, and we have Councillor Kathy Nielsen, if you'd like to come forward. Oh, yes. And Ms Finnegan's has a conflict and will excuse herself from this item.
Thank you, Chair and panel. I just want to say that my concern relates to the proposed first floor studio to be developed on top of the existing single-storey garage fronting Ocean Lane. I therefore strongly support condition 2A, requiring the deletion of the proposed first floor studio above the existing garage. That's my main point, and I suppose as an aside, I was rather concerned and think it's highly regrettable that the site remains non-compliant with the required permeable surfaces control. That's my major point. Thanks, Chair.
We have an objector, Mr Paul Say, and Mr Nick Greenaway. You're speaking together, are you?
Yeah. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to this application. My name is Paul Say, and my wife and I are the owners of 15 Northumberland Street, located at the rear of the subject property. There are a number of neighbours who would like the opportunity to speak today, but given the limited time, Nick and myself will speak on behalf of all interests. That's not us. I'll keep going. Put simply, we are all very concerned about the bulk and height of the proposed studio, and therefore endorse Council's condition that it be removed from the proposal. We've lived in Clovelly most of our lives, and about 2 years ago built our home at Northumberland Street. It is a two-storey house and not a single-storey house as represented in the papers. Our living areas are upstairs, designed to take in the advantage of the sea breeze and the ocean and the very narrow band of ocean views at the horizon over the subject house and other houses along Ocean Street. We purposely kept the height of our houses well below the permissible levels to minimise overshadowing on our neighbours and to comply with the view sharing guidelines. We did this with the comfort of knowing that 5 years ago, Council had constrained the height of the subject house when it was built to a relative RL of 41.030. Refer you to the screen, which shows the current view from our living room, that's on the left, together with the impact of the proposed garage studio. Now, there might not be iconic views of the Opera House and the Harbour Bridge, but I can tell you it's very pleasant to be able to see the horizon, the sunrise, and, as I said, that band of ocean view. Despite no change to the LEP and DCP, the current proposal is over half a metre above the subject house itself and significantly changes the extent and dynamic of our ocean view. Whilst we also have concerns about the bulk of the studio in relation to the house and surrounding development, we feel that the proposal seeks to undermine and diminish the principles of view sharing established 5 years ago.
Hello committee members, my name is Nick Greenaway and I live at 11 Northumberland Street, Clovelly, along with my wife, 2 daughters and 2 dogs. We've been there for 20 years, which means we're now almost considered local in Clovelly terms. We live directly opposite number 14, separated by a narrow back lane. And look, we aren't anti-development. If we were, we would have gone mad by now because there's been so much development around us. But it's just what's fair and reasonable. In 2013, the previous owner of this property did listen to our concerns and scaled back his development. But now here we are again, and clearly this first floor development over the garage at 14 Ocean Street, it's not fair, it's not reasonable, and it's non-compliant. It's bigger than the house, taller than the house, and it's wider than the house, and it will loom directly over our backyard, our pool and our main living area and block our modest ocean views by some 50%. It really will dominate our views and skyline. And I know they'll probably say, oh, well, it's compromised views anyway, but I can sit at the desk next to my bed and look and see breaching whales over the house that is there now. With that development, that's all gone. And so understandably, we object to this, and anyone would. Because we live directly opposite number 14 Ocean Street, we have a lot to lose with this garage studio was allowed to proceed. Clearly a lot of our other residents have their own justifiable concerns, not least of which is precedent, and the fact that there's a lack of floor space ratio for properties under 300 square metres, and this really has created an unfair playing field and allowed for exploitation. Their floor space ratio is almost double that of property if it was 320 square metres. So it's created a lot of tension. There's no other garage developments in that back lane, and it's the tyranny of small decisions. It's just going to create more and more of this built-up environment, which really does create friction. We used to have street parties in our area, which were legendary, but not anymore. And finally, I just want to take this opportunity to thank Brenton Pearce and the Randwick Council Planning Department for doing their job, sticking to its own rules and rejecting this part of the DA. And I hope this panel does the same. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we now have the architect for the applicant, Mr. Michael Stevens.
Clarification. My name's Michael Stevens, but I'm the owner, I'm not the architect. Number 14 Ocean Street's our home. I live there with my wife. My comments today relate specifically to the above garage part of the proposal. That's the part of the DA that's led us here today. I wish to comment on the Council's development application report. The report is not fair and accurate in its assessment, and it's not a fair assessment on which this panel can make a reasonable and fair judgment of our application. It's not an accurate reflection of the process and engagement we undertook for this application. It contains material errors. It states that we disregarded advice from the Council's assessing officer in regards to the height and design of the above garage development. This is not true. It fails to detail changes that we made to the design as a result of that advice, nor does it detail the feedback we received from the officer in relation to our changed design, him telling us that it had satisfied the requirements and he was recommending it for approval. The report describes our efforts as tokenistic and disingenuous. The report's use of this offensive, inflammatory and language that's prejudicial. I want to explain, this has been a 2-year process. I feel I need to explain this because if you read the report in isolation, you could come away with a view that we're cowboys. I first inquired 2 years ago to council officers to understand what development was allowable. Keep in mind, I'm not a planner. Without a developed plan, the council officer directed me to an online library of documents. Totally out of my depth. I engaged an architect, a surveyor, a town planner and now a lawyer. The architect and town planner were chosen because they had experience in laneway development within the Randwick Council boundaries. They knew what was allowable, they knew the likely issues we'd need to address, and they had recent experience in working with the council to get approval for such a development. The request for information makes wrong claims. It states that we failed to submit shadow diagrams as part of our DA assessment. We had supplied extensive shadow modelling, and when we were asked for more, we did them in a timely manner. The RFI and Council DA report wrongly state that we failed to consider view loss as part of the application. I appreciate this is a point on which much focus is on. Our statement of environmental effects makes an assessment of view loss. I make a few points. It contended that due to the modest height of the above garage addition, I appreciate that's open to debate, the slope of the site and the setback of the properties to the west, placing them on a higher elevation, that the views to the east and the surrounding properties would be maintained. My architect, town planner... Yes, thanks. My architect, town planner and myself discussed view loss and other matters with the assessing officer at the meeting at these chambers on April 1. We initiated that meeting wanting to address the issues. At that point, we were already liaising with other property owners to enable view loss assessments from within these properties. Again, we initiated the extensive site visit the council report refers to. A view assessment, as described in the council report, requires access to other properties. That's an unreasonable expectation in an initial DA. However, we were clearly willing to work with the council. After the meeting, and along with amended drawings, we included a photo montage showing the view impact. Once included the council report, we believe it shows that views are maintained. In regards to the disregarding the council officer claim, in our amended plans we reduced the height, the ridge height, we reduced the width of the lane facing dormer and therefore the bulk, we reduced the width of the dormer facing the house, and we reduced the studio floor space. I'm almost finished. We believe that further increases to the side setbacks on the main roof would render the below garage unusable because it would force a stair into off the sides of the garage. The wall height facing the lane is 3.9 metres, not 4.5 as stated in the RFI. The ridge height in the lane is 5.5. This is also within allowable limits. We disagree to the reference to outbuildings in the council report, as we are subject to the assessment under laneway development. Also, the diagram in the council's development control plan for laneway development does not show that the loft level is wholly within an attic spreading from a garage level. On September 3 this year, the assessing officer told me that he had accepted our revised design and that he would be recommending for approval. We accept that at that point it was still up for revision and indeed would still come to this planning panel. We accept that. But if there had been any further issues with the design, then it should have been raised at that stage with us. I believe we had been anything but disingenuous and tokenistic. To date, I've spent $30,000 or thereabouts on this DA, doing everything council has asked me. I think it's absolutely absurd that I have to spend anywhere near that amount to simply get an objective and impartial consideration, an application of this application for, at the end of the day, what is nothing more than a building extension that is probably going to cost me about what I've already spent to get to here. I also note that the elected member who spoke earlier today, I contacted and they referred me on to council officers. Thank you.
Any questions? Sorry, I've got one question. If you want to go. One of the issues that was raised is about the reduction in permeable area. Can you just explain?
Well, the report's got it wrong. A site visit today would have showed you that.
So can you just explain why it's got it wrong?
Well, I don't know what the reference there is. The report refers to the only bit of garden on that property being a planter box at the front. That's wrong.
My understanding is that the report talks that there is an area that's joining your existing terrace that's grassed and it doesn't get enough sun for the grass or something like
Once
that.
again, a site visit would have been helpful. That's correct. You would have seen it today. The grass is okay. It dies in summer. In winter, it burns off in summer. It's at a higher level. It doesn't flow neatly from the house. And my willingness there is not to pave it. I've said to the council officers, I'm happy to keep it so the rain can penetrate. I think it's the wrong outcome, by the way. Under the house, you've got to be careful. It's like a literal bloody stream under it. It's I'm happy to go with whatever. If the rain's got to penetrate the soil, so be it. But the claim in the current may well be right, but the description that there's only a planter box is wrong.
All right, but just you want the area.
Yes, I do. I want that area to be. It stands about this high.
Well, on the section, it's showing it as being at the same level as the existing terrace. Is that correct or not?
No, that's incorrect.
So the plans are incorrect.
No, I don't believe so.
So that's your existing terrace, and that's where you want to put an extension to that terrace.
Versions it is.
Well, it's revision B.
Yeah, okay.
You might like.
Yeah,
Sorry.
you might.
Sorry, I was
Yeah.
town planner on that. Sorry.
Yes.
I was just dropping by.
You're just dropping by.
So, no, currently, if that, I don't know what version of those are, Anthony, that bit there, you come out here and it steps up 1.2 metres and there's a retained earth section. The problem with it is,
Sorry, it's just I think the existing shows it.
that's what I want.
That's what you want.
Yeah.
So it's new terrace to match existing. So it's actually been dropped.
All right, so at the moment, it's at a higher level.
That's correct.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, we don't.
It's got a set of stairs, there's a bit of lawn here, there's a planter box, and that's the point.
So it's 37.9 and it's going down to 34.
Okay, and you're proposing it will be a permeable surface?
I'm happy to accept that, that's fine.
And things like a planter box at the end of it?
Yeah, that's in the plans.
There it is in the plans.
Yeah, well, this is it here. This is, well, that's quite, that's
Well,
wrong.
that's saying it's going to be grass here at
No,
an
no,
upper
no,
level.
No, that's wrong, that's wrong. So can I, yeah, just bear with me.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
trying to
no,
understand
it's
your
just-
question.
it's just that-
This bit, this whole level, can I draw on this?
Yeah, sure.
So this area here, you come out the back door, it's at that level, then it steps up roughly a metre. That's this bit. At the edge, there's a planter box, in the middle there's lawns. So this bit, this entire bit, there's stairs up there, that's wrong. Go to the garage. This bit
So
here.
there are the stairs shown
That's correct,
there,
the stairs.
and they get to there,
That's
and it's
concrete.
grass.
That's concrete there. That's existing.
Mhm.
This bit is garden. This bit here is garden. This bit here is lawn. There's a retained wall here. What I'm saying is the plan, that needs to come down because this is unclear.
But what are you proposing? You're proposing, this is showing, this is the plan that if you get approval will be what's approved. It would be approved with that as a level that's contiguous with
Yeah,
your
that's
existing
correct.
terrace. There would be steps here, there would be then grass that goes around like that and a
That's
planter
garden.
box in
We
there.
could have a
Coda.
planter as well.
That's garden. We can, we discussed this with the assessing officer and it was clear at that point.
All right, but when you say that's concrete, is that going to stay as concrete or is it
Yes, no, that stays, otherwise I can't get up to the garage.
Okay. All right, and in terms of this basement area, at the moment you're proposing it having a floor to ceiling height of 2.2 or something like that. So it's not habitable.
No, that's correct.
All right, so a condition to the effect that it's not habitable, you have no objection to that.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's below grade.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we'll defer our consideration of that matter. 18 Marine Parade, is everyone here for that now?
Sure.
So yes, Miss Madeline Blanchfield, and you're speaking, and then you've got Kerry Nash to
Kerry
answer
Nash.
questions. All right, thank you.
I've got a PowerPoint which.
Miss Finnegan to come back in.
Is this one to flick through? Ready? Afternoon, Chair and panel members. I'm speaking on behalf of the applicant. The owner of this property has 2 adult children and the property's been in the family for 30 years. She does not wish to live in a 300 square metre house with her children, nor to live in a 60 square metre granny flat. She requires single level living with level access. She wants housing flexibility, affordability and accessibility, all of which are supported by council. The following 3D images illustrate how the existing dwelling compares to the proposed, and I think that's something that's not apparent in the drawings or the report.
I'll just flick through. So the bulk and scale is significantly reduced. Articulation along the side of the dwelling is massively improved. I've got hard copies of these if you'd like. Amenity of private open space is improved. Front setbacks and privacy are increased. And there's excellent residential amenity. On the one on the left is the courtyard on the top floor, and the one on the right is the very sunny and quite private open space to the lower level. So obviously what we've done is split the two dwellings horizontally rather than vertically. A high quality, flexible, accessible dual occupancy such as the proposed is allowed 0.15 to 1 less FSR than a house or a pair of 3-storey semis, because dual occupancies are not given the same LEP FSR exemption. Given the inadequacy of this definition, we suggest that a relatively minor breach of FSR should be considered by council. I'll just go back to those first images. So I won't go through all council's particular objections. I think most of them are completely unfounded and addressed just by looking at these slides. The important ones are FSR and view loss. In regards to FSR, our calculation is 0.59 to 1. Council disagrees with that. The areas of contention are that council would count the ground floor lift lobby. I don't see how, because you have to use that to get to the lift, so in our opinion that's not FSR. They would also count the breezeway on the first floor, which is not enclosed, which in my opinion is not correct. And they're counting the voids over the internal stairs, which contradicts Part J in the GFA definition of the LEP. The final thing I will touch on is view loss, and I'll need a slight extension of time. Thank you. The proposed dwelling complies with overall height and overshadowing requirements. It improves neighbouring amenity and is within the footprint of the existing dwelling on the site. Notwithstanding the above, there appears to be a view from number 2 Undine Street of Wedding Cake Island. If that was considered a critical issue by yourselves and council, we think that we may be able to adjust the ceiling height slightly so that that view is protected, but we would need to do some proper view analysis, which without access to that property we couldn't do for our application. Thank you.
Any questions?
Just a quick question. I could get a calculator out, but you probably know it. What is the floor-to-floor height?
We've got 3 metres on the ground, 2.7 in the middle, and 3 metres on the top.
So that's floor-to-ceiling, but...
Floor-to-ceiling. Oh, floor-to-floor, there's an extra 400 between each of those. So 3.4 floor-to-floor, and then 3.1 and 3.4. Yeah.
So 3.4, 3.1, 3.4.
I'll just make sure.
We can...
100% right on that. We usually allow 400 floor zone, and then the roof would have an extra 100 mils. So the 400 zone between floor and ceiling, in our experience, is only just enough to get plumbing and things through, and the roof would need at least 500 for the drainage, but we would take the height out of the actual floor to ceiling of the properties if we had to.
Right, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
You would be able to reduce the top floor by 300 millimetres, is that?
The top floor is where the owner of the property would live, and she's very keen to have, generous ceiling height. So I think we'd probably have to pinch it out of the lowest level, which would be a shame because the reason the ceiling's high is to let the most sun in that we can. But I just want to sort of put forward that if that's a sticking issue, we would be happy to have a look at it, pending some proper view analysis.
But you don't at this stage know what is causing the view loss? Is it the garage or is it the
I do. I've got a couple
edge?
of views here. It's the leading edge of the building, which is in exactly...
The terrace?
Of the terrace, yeah. Would you like me to pass them on?
So potentially all you need to do is lower
Lower the front. Yeah,
lower
we
the
could,
terrace,
we could potentially just lower the front.
the frame.
It's sort of, would you like to see this?
Yes.
That's the existing dwelling, and that's the proposed. So it's actually not just the terrace, but it depends where you're standing, and
Sure.
you know. So we'd be happy to undertake some more
Right.
thorough view analysis.
Thank you. I mean, I suppose there's the floor space ratio issue, but there's also in the council officer's report a lot of discussion about the extent of excavation and the depth of the excavation, and the amenity of the lower level, which is resulting from it being, I suppose, excavated down to such a lower level. And then when you look at the actual plans on the level above, first floor plan, there's the whole, thing that says courtyard above, which clearly you're going to have to excavate and could easily be a second bedroom there, and then you wouldn't need the second bedroom on the lower level.
So that's got deep soil for the courtyard above there, and the idea is that the bedrooms are in the centre. One belongs to the apartment above, one belongs to the apartment below, so that they both get a view and good outlook and sun. We're just putting the important spaces in the right spot, really, in this.
Yes,
plan.
but potentially the amenity of bedroom 2 on the ground floor plan would have less amenity than if that bedroom 2 were on where it says courtyard above. And you can easily get a certain, you don't need that depth of soil to plant greenery.
Yeah, look, we could take a look at that. I think it'd be hard to get a decent tree above, and access into that room. It's a little tricky, but
Yeah, I mean, I suppose what I'm saying is there seem to be quite a few things in the plan as it is, forgetting about the numerical FSR, but they actually add to the bulk of the building. So, again, there's the rainwater and plant AC room. So it's the combination of the actual depth of excavation, the amenity of what you're proposing on the lowest ground level towards the rear of the site, and then the fact that you've got quite a lot of area on the other 2 levels that could be used as habitable space if you looked at replanning. So if you've got any comments on that.
look, we did go through a couple of rounds with council and had a pre-DA meeting and tried. The gist of it was that because this is 2 apartments stacked horizontally, it's just not going to fly regardless. If we could isolate the issues to excavation, we'd be very happy to have a look at moving some of the space around. But I actually don't think that the building bulk, when you look at it compared to what's there, is in any way problematic or visually intrusive. I think we'd be happy to look at putting water tanks under in lieu of a bedroom, but it would still be the same amount of excavation overall. And the courtyard is pretty important to our clients, so we wouldn't want to do anything that was detrimental to that.
Any questions? No. Thank you. We'll defer our consideration of that matter.
Thank you.
And the next matter is 39 to 47 St Paul's Street, Randwick, the Ritz Cinema. And we have, again, Councillor Kathy Nielsen, if you wish to come forward.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say that I support the recommendation for the operation of the temporary outdoor cinema, and particularly supporting the recommendation of the trial period be implemented on the operating hours and patrons over a 12-month period to ensure amenity impact is not adversely affected. So, in other words, I'm strongly supporting consent requirements 4 and 22. Thank you.
Do you have any opinion about the hours of operation being till 12 o'clock or till 11?
That's why I prefer the recommendation being till 11, but I also like the fact that it's a trial period for a year. So at the end of the year, then perhaps it would be appropriate to consider extending it to that, to midnight, yeah. Thank you.
And then we have the applicant, Mr. Patrick LeBon.
Thank you for the opportunity to present. Now, before I start, I just asked the Chair to request permission for my client who's travelled from Melbourne to attend this meeting today, just to say a few words. I will try to keep it to 3 minutes as allocated. So is that something that you possibly allow?
We've probably got some questions.
Maybe he can talk first and I can answer questions after. That's, yeah, okay, thank you.
So what's your name?
The gentleman's name is Eddie Tamir.
Hi there. Thanks for listening. My name is Eddie Tamir, Tamir. I and my family own and operate 3 cinemas in Melbourne and now the Ritz Cinemas in Randwick. I guess we're a bit unusual and perhaps a bit eccentric these days. We love film and our main focus is the cinema business. All 4 of our cinemas are original historic buildings. In Melbourne, we have respected and highlighted the historic features of all those cinema buildings and then expanded and evolved each to make them relevant, comfortable, and hopefully world-class offers. Each actually has an outdoor cinema. One has an outdoor cinema in the Dandenongs in Belgrave, and 2 have rooftop cinemas that operate December to Easter every night of the week. And these outdoor cinemas offer a unique adventure for the cinema goer. We aim to evolve the Ritz in the same way. The laneway cinema is the first element in the evolution. It's a way to bring life to what is now a dead area that the public really never sees and kind of never really wants to see because it's a bit scary and not particularly palatable. So what we have in mind is to create a place that has no equivalent in Sydney. We require the use of the area, just apropos the previous comment, till midnight to make the cinema viable and the investment worthwhile. Films start after sunset. It's just the reality. You can't show films outside unless it's dark enough. And films vary. You know, they can be 2 hours, they can be 3 hours. In fact, in the case of The Irishman, it's 3.5 hours. So not necessarily arguing for that, but you know, films range. So we wouldn't want to be restricted for the sake of commerciality to films that are, you know, below 90 minutes, plus a bit of pack away time. As in our other operations, we'll be mindful of any impact of the surrounding businesses and residences. In fact, we think what we have in mind will be a contribution to businesses commercially as well as to the residents' lifestyle and entertainment possibilities. We've chosen to use headphones to reduce impact, obviously, on the surrounding businesses and residences. So there'll be no sound at all from any films other than in people's ears directly. It's a tough, competitive, disrupted, interrupted, and therefore high-risk business, and there's very few independents left. The Ritz is already a Sydney icon. We'd appreciate the council and the panel's support in our journey to create a world-class cinema offer in Randwick and allow the Ritz to survive and thrive for the next 80 years. Thank you.
So just in closing, and then I'm happy to take some questions. As Eddie mentioned, there's a commercial reality and an operational reality that the operating hours have to be to 12 a.m. Just to allow for sufficient time for the films and the pack away and everything else associated with that to occur. So as we've written to the panel earlier this week, it provided the clarification regarding the acoustic analysis. It shows that there's no additional impact. So we've addressed that matter raised in the council assessment report, and we have proposed the 12 a.m. as it states in the assessment report. So from that perspective, we're seeking, obviously supporting council's recommendation for approval, but the council condition number 22 is amended relating to the operating hours to 12 a.m. and also condition number 1, which has a few minor typographical errors, which I've raised in the letter, just in regards to the architectural drawings.
So what are those? What are those changes?
Condition 1, there's just some there's a number missing in front of each of the plan drawing numbers. There's a number 1 missing from each of them, and the architect's name is actually ITN rather than ILN, I believe they've put in the condition number 1. And yes, and as I mentioned, condition number 22 relating to the hours of operation, that obviously we're proposing till 12 a.m. as my client has mentioned. That's just without that being part of the approval, it's simply just not operationally or financially viable with the investment. And I thank the councillor who spoke previously for her support. It is a trial period, so I believe that's a reasonable approach for council, given it's a unique use that's not really common in Sydney. So we're not opposing that, and we also not opposing the condition regarding no audible noise from any residents after 12. So we're going to comply with that condition. I believe it's 32. So all other conditions in terms of management will be adhered to, and we're also going to provide a revised plan of management as per condition 4, which will include any recommendations of the acoustic report. So we feel that overall the impacts are going to be very minimal and well managed.
So you'd need condition 4 amended as well?
Well, no, that's already proposed. There's a condition in the conditions.
At the moment it says 11 p.m.
Yes, just in terms of the council's condition number 4 has asked for some revisions to the plan of management, and so that we've got no issue with that. Obviously, reflecting the 12 a.m. closing time that we're seeking, but the operation, the point I was trying to make, the operation of the temporary cinema will be in accordance with that plan of management. So we feel as a total package, the impacts are going to be quite well managed, and particularly given there were no objections from the nearest affected neighbours in terms of noise, we feel that there's quite a good degree of support and excitement in the community for this use.
All right, so just in relation to the 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock closing time, so in summer it would start, presumably a film would start at 8:30, and the concern is that most of them would be including ads, would be 2 hours, so that would be till 10:30, but there's the occasional film that's longer.
And probably perhaps Eddie can talk a bit more to that in terms of what goes around the film, because obviously there's trailers and everything like that. Perhaps he might, given he's the operator.
So sometimes based on the sunsets, it might start at 9 o'clock, and yes, there'll be ads and trailers.
We're not in Melbourne.
We've looked at the sunsets, and it varies, but obviously whatever we can do to start as early as possible, we will do based on the sunset, but we don't want to be restricted to not playing a film because it's 2.5 hours long. Just because of the condition, we wouldn't be able to make that work.
Mm-hmm. And with the 12 o'clock, that would be everything completed by 12?
Yep.
Like everything cleared up, nobody there, everyone gone?
Yep.
Including staff?
Yep.
Can I just ask a question on that, probably for Mr. Tamir? How does that midnight close compare with what happens in the main cinema? With are there still people coming out from other films?
Yes, and midnight is kind of the ballpark, but sometimes it can be 12:30 that people come out.
That's because of the movie times, or they're just pottering and having a drink after?
Because of movie times and the way, we don't necessarily go by sunset. We go by whatever other films are playing and how we space things out. So, it could be,
And the people from the outdoor cinema, they would exit through the main cinema.
That's right.
They'd just be part of the group of people all
Yep,
exiting.
part of the rhythm of the,
Yep.
the general
Okay.
rhythm of the cinema.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay. All right. Thanks very much. Thank you.
So we'll defer our consideration on that matter. And the last item is 140 Maroubra Road, Maroubra. We have, on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Jamie Doran.
Hi there, I'm Jamie Doran from Doran Project Management. In light of the lack of objections, I'm here just to support the application and answer any questions that you've got.
I don't think we've got any questions.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. So, come forward, Mr. Betra. So this is in relation to the first item, 190 to 192 Oberon Street, Coogee.
Thank you. I apologise for this, but my clients actually, there is more than them in the room today. We then had the opportunity to break after the adjournment of our case, and they would actually request a deferral. And as part of that, we would try and meet with the objectors as well to see if we could look at increasing that rear setback. I'm not sure how this follows then, whether you then provide deferral with reasons and what you would like to see in that deferral, or if it's just deferred to just make discussions. I'm open to.
So do you, normally with the deferral, the applicant would request it and they would say because they want to do X, Y, Z. So do you have any, I mean, what you're saying, it would be to hold discussions with objectors and investigate increasing the setback.
Correct.
of the proposal.
Yes.
Okay.
That's
and
exactly
how
right.
long would that process take?
We would envisage, say, 2 to 4 weeks. I'm not sure how that then runs, whether the panel then break and come back for February, or whether it, I'm not sure if it would then be resolved in terms of objections, whether it needs to come back to a formal meeting, or I'm not sure on that, but we'd be open to either, whether it comes back in February. I imagine there wouldn't be able to be anything before that, I imagine.
No, there's no planned meeting in January, but potentially with these things, sometimes if it is deferred, the resolution gives the option for the matter to be dealt with essentially electronically by the same panel through the circulation of papers. But obviously that's at the discretion. It usually goes in as a standard wording, but if there's a lot of community objections and things, it tends to come back to a public meeting.
Yeah, we may not be able to resolve everyone's concerns given there's neighbours to the west, south and east, but I think we can go towards addressing the aim of what they were trying to achieve in terms of the increased rear setback.
Okay, so 2 to 4 weeks is roughly what date? Like you would need 4 weeks?
I think so, to allow for discussions to be held and then to amend plans to the manner that they could then be endorsed potentially. They would need, obviously floor plan sections, elevations, and the discussions. There might be a bit of toing and froing in that regard, so I would think 4 weeks should be sufficient.
All right, well, we'll obviously take that on board.
Thank you very much
for coming back.
Thanks.
Thanks. Concludes the public hearing part of the meeting. The panel will now adjourn to deliberate and determine the matters that have been before us today. We will actually vote on these matters, and our decision and the reasons for our decision will be made available through Council's website either late tonight or tomorrow. And as I said before, an audio recording of the public meeting will also be made available through Council's website. So I declare that the meeting is closed at whatever the time is. 2:48. Thank you.